Hey everybody, welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields, and today we're talking the beer fridge, or the Kegerator. It's about how you get your beers cold and you keep them on tap. Whether you want 1 or 4 like I have, or you want to use an upright fridge or a chest freezer, we're going to break down some of the equipment that you need and then how to convert a refrigerator like this into a Kegerator. So grab a beer, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned. All right, so either you're thinking about getting into kegging, or maybe you have a couple kegs and you're thinking about a better way to have them stored in a Kegerator or an old refrigerator or a Kegerator or what have you. Some people use an old chest freezer to convert into a Kegerator. Some people convert an old refrigerator like I have to have several taps on or even one tap on. And I'm going to kind of go through both styles and why I chose to do the fridge, and then we'll go through what it takes to convert that. So I used to use my chest freezer, not this one, but a different one, as my serving refrigerator. And I had my Inkbird hooked up to it. It would do my beer temperatures, but I also wanted to ferment in there, and the fermentation temperature and my serving temperature were two different things. And so I either had to take my beer out of it, or I had to put my beer in it and cool it back down, and it was kind of a pain in the butt. So now I have a dedicated chest freezer just for fermentation, and I keep that. I actually have a beer fermenting in there right now. And then I have my regular refrigerator that I have my taps on. I like the refrigerator a little bit better, only because I can put more stuff in it while I already have my kegs in there. This refrigerator fits up to 6 kegs. I have 4 on tap, and then I use my freezer for hops and other things. Plus, I still have room in the refrigerator itself for other beers, yeast, and you name it, I can put it in there. And so I'm gonna kind of go through what it takes to convert this into a Kegerator. But I'll tell you right now, don't buy a new one if you don't have to. There's a lot of them on sale on a Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist. I got this one for 50 bucks. It's been going strong for a year and a half just from some dude's garage that was moving, and it's worked amazing. Even if it doesn't, you don't have that much invested into it, and everything else you get to take with you. So if your refrigerator ends up dying or you need a new one, it's really not hard to convert another one, again, for only 50 bucks. So go ahead, look up, find yourself an old fridge, and we'll get started on some of the equipment that you're gonna need to start kegging. All right, first we're gonna start with some things outside of the refrigerator that you might need to get started. In addition to things that you might already have. This is a ball lock keg, you're gonna need a keg, and you're definitely gonna need CO2. You can do that in a couple different ways. This is a 5-pound CO2, this is what most people use. I don't like to fill this up quite as much, so I actually have a large 20-pound CO2 tank that hooks up from the ground. And so you can see this black hose that comes into my regulators here. That is the CO2 line that's going to my 20-pound CO2 tank. So my 2 regulators on the wall there, you don't need to do that. That's kind of optional. 1 regulator would be just fine. The reason I have 2 is one of them is for pressure of my beer serving pressure that carbonates all of the beer, and it lets me push the beer out into the glass. And the other one is specifically for charging a new keg. So when I have all my kegs hooked up in my refrigerator, they're all at about 10 to 12 pounds PSI. What I like to do is have a different one that I can hook up at about 30 pounds of pressure, as this one's set right now, to charge a keg in just about 1.5 to 2 days, so I don't have to wait that long before it's charged up. So totally optional to have 2. That's the reason I have 2. A lot of times though, that these are also hooked directly to your CO2 tank. And for a little while, I had this 5-pound cylinder put next to it on the wall on a little shelf, and then this was mounted along with the CO2 tank right next to it. I have this hose going there, and I'll have all of the equipment that you would need in the video description below in case you want to check this out. But I have this high pressure hose that gave me the ability then to put this 20-pound tank on the floor. And then these have screws on the back of them that you can mount to. In this case, I've just put an aluminum bar and screwed it directly to the wall. So these will have shutoffs on the bottom here that will stop the pressure when you're not using them. So you can see this one's off and this one's on. They're both running into the side of my refrigerator here. And so we're gonna give you a little bit closer in-depth look at what that looks like inside the refrigerator. I just wanted to point out a few of the things. So in the sidewall here, you're going to have to drill a couple of holes, and you're going to want to look at your refrigerator because most of the coils for refrigerators are in the back. In this case, this is an older fridge, you can actually see the coils in the back, and that's very common. But in some cases, they're in the sides as well. I haven't ran into any personally making any of these myself, but you'll want to check on that. Freezers, you can't do that, so you actually have to create a collar, and because the coils go all the way around the outside, you can't drill right through the side of these. That's why you'll see a lot of people who do the Keggers have a wood collar that they make and then take the lid actually off and put it on the top of the wood collar to convert it. In this case, the fridge, you can drill right through the side. Now you're going to want to know where that dividing line is between the freezer and the refrigerator and stay below that when you're running your 2 lines or even 1 line. I use a spade bit and it looks like this. And then I put that on and I match the diameter of my hose and I drill that through. And then when I get all done, I caulk the outside with some flexible silicone caulking. So let's go take a look at the front. We're gonna go through the taps and then go look at the inside and what it all entails with the hoses and things in the inside. All right, so the front of my Kegerator here, I have a couple of taps here, so I have 4 different taps. These are the inner tap handles. I used to have the standard faucets. I have a video on those if you'd like to check out the difference between the forward sealing faucets and the standard faucets. I highly recommend getting forward sealing. They're a lot easier to clean and they don't gunk up as much or stick as often. And then I have this little tray that I actually made. I didn't want to spend a lot of money on those stainless steel trays, and you still have to take them off to dump them out and clean them anyway. So I ended up finding this plastic one and I screwed it on with 2 screws, sheet metal screws into the front of the refrigerator here, and then I just put a couple of napkins down to kind of catch any of the drips and just have to replace those every once in a while. But this acts as my drip tray, so that works out perfectly. One thing you're going to want to keep in mind is when you do drill the holes for these, how far you have between your freezer door and your where you're drilling the hole. So you're going to want to measure those out. One thing to keep in mind, you're not going to be able to replace these handles very much if you don't have a whole lot of room. One thing you can do is put like a bracket or and screw these doors together. So therefore, if you do want to have longer tap handles, that bracket would essentially keep the doors together and you'd open the refrigerator and the freezer all at once in order to have a longer tap handle. I've actually made my own tap handles before. These are these little buildings for Cityscape Brewing, of course, and these would go on, but I could only make them so high because of the doors here. So that kind of correlates with the inside of the refrigerator, and we'll look at the inside of the door first. All right, so here we have the inside of the refrigerator door, and you can kind of see why I chose to drill where I did on the inside of the door. A lot of the refrigerators kind of have built-in shelves or sometimes removable shelves on the doors. You'll actually have to kind of modify what this looks like depending on your drawer situation that you have going on here. I actually had to cut off a divider that was right here. You can tell there's a divider right here. And then I chose to put my tap handles kind of right in the middle. That allowed me to put this board here, and that helps when you screw down the shafts that go between here, that helps making sure that that gets nice and secure. There is insulation and things in between here. Again, using that spade bit, I was able to drill through the door using that same diameter as the shaft, push those through, and then also drill the same holes in this board and then screw them on tight here. And then these have a barb nipple that will go to my serving lines that go to each one of the kegs. In this case, I was actually able to also keep some of these shelving units that are adjustable on the inside, able to keep some extra beers, some yeast, some different beers that I have from local breweries and things like that I've gotten, and you can have a little bit extra storage space. In some cases, you'll need to actually take all of this stuff out depending on how many kegs you have and how deep your refrigerator is. All right, moving on to the main part of the fridge. You're gonna need to take all of the racks from the inside of the fridge out, including the bottom one, unless it's made of metal, but a lot of them are made of glass or plastic that will not support the weight of the kegs, especially when they're full. So what I've done here is there's an actual shelf of plastic where the motors and compressors and things sit in the back. And what I've done is I took a piece of plywood and then I attached 2 feet that you can see down here as 2x4s, and they help support the whole thing. So the back is actually resting on the compressor shelf itself, and then these 2x4s are sitting where the shelf would normally sit. And in this case, it allows me to have some extra storage for beers and water, if you put water in your beer fridge, underneath this shelf here, well, I can fit up to 6 kegs in the shelf, 3 by 3. And so each of these will sit on this shelf here, and then I'll have extra room even if I needed to put something small up on the top of the kegs inside. All right, this is where those 2 gas lines come in to my beer fridge. You can see the 2 red lines. One of them kind of comes out right here. This is the one I use to charge up an extra keg. So that one just sits basically with a gas connection, and sits empty unless I'm chilling up a keg or carving up a keg. The other one goes to this manifold here, and the manifold has essentially 4 additional outputs. So I have 3 down on the bottom and then 1 off the side closest to the camera. This one regulates the 4 that have the serving pressure. So this one has the 10 to 12 psi per hose line there. I have a couple of them shut off because I only have 2 kegs in here right now, and that's why I'm doing this video, because I'm currently making 2 beers and fermenting them as we speak. And so, as you can also tell, I have some color-coded zip ties on those lines. And that's kind of important, because as you do have a bunch of kegs in here, you're gonna have a bunch of hoses going every which way. And I have them tied here. I have them tied to the gas lines when they come off of the keg, or on the other side, excuse me, when they're attached to the keg. I also have them going from the beer line on the keg to the beer line on the door. And you probably noticed that when we were showing the door picture. And that's to help me keep track of which beer is what when it goes through here. So if I'm changing out a keg and I need to shut off the gas, I don't need to follow a clear line back, for instance, to try and find out which line goes to which one. I know that if I'm shutting off the blue keg, it's the blue line I need to shut off. So that's kind of a pro tip there. And then also kind of same thing on the handle. It all kind of corresponds together. But I've just used some sheetrock screws here, some sheet metal screws, and those O brackets. I don't know what you call those metal brackets, basically to hold that manifold in place. And so that's just screwed into here, into the plastic. Doesn't take a whole lot of weight, and it just holds those in place out of the way near the top. So the kegs don't hit them, and they have enough room to go from the bottom out to all the kegs when they're sitting here full. It's also super important to use hose clamps for literally everything. They're going to save your life when it comes to the gas side of things. So once you hook everything up, make sure you use hose clamps, and then you can use some spray bottle with some sanitizer. And once you have everything on and your gas turned on, spray all of the connections and things with the CO2, that the CO2 is connected to with the sanitizer. If you see any bubbling coming from any of the connections, make sure you tighten them. It doesn't take very long for a whole CO2 cylinder to go empty if that's not really, really tightened down and buttoned up. Last but not least, the freezer space. And this, you don't have to do anything with this. I keep a crap ton of hops up on the door here, and other than that, I have some chilled glasses and some extra food. So the benefit of having a refrigerator is you get an extra freezer space that you can basically do whatever you want with. All right, and that's gonna wrap up the quick tutorial on how I built my Kegerator. In this case, I have 4 taps. You could choose to just do 1 and add more at a different time. Totally fine, you don't need to do that. But as always, I'm gonna have all the equipment that I used, including regulators, hoses, hose clamps, the taps that I have, standard tap handles, everything you're gonna need, the manifold, all those are gonna be down in the link description. So everything that I'm using, you can find to use yourself and create your own thing. Again, do not buy a new fridge. Buy an old one, find one in your mom's basement, grandma's garage, whatever you need to do, and convert your own. It's cheap, it's simple, and you can store a heck of a lot more in one of these than you can in a Keezer. But to each their own. Maybe you want to keep it in your house and you don't want the whole refrigerator. You just want a little small Keezer in the side. Everything equipment-wise is exactly the same. As always, you are welcome to ask any questions or comments down in the video description. Also, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps my channel out a lot. And with that, happy brewing and cheers.